never, ever, ever going to destroy the world by flood again. And he said, now I want you to renew this mandate. I want you to go out into the world and subdue it, multiply, fill the earth. So that God's plan is still in play. Hey guys, welcome back to the Kingdom Vision Podcast. This is week 10 of our devotional series and episode 10 of the podcast. The week is titled A Fresh Start. And the flood is over, the waters have receded, the land is beginning to dry. Noah and his family step out, and there's a rainbow. And we talked on Monday about God's bow. His rainbow is in the sky, and it's his covenant promise. And what really I loved about just the whole idea of covenant that we talked about, and several of you have commented through the week about feeling this same way, is that, you know, God didn't put us on probation, didn't tell us just to try better. He actually just wiped the slate clean. He said, I'm never, ever, ever going to destroy the world by flood again. And he said, now I want you to renew this mandate. I want you to go out into the world and subdue it, multiply, fill the earth. So that God's plan is still in play. And I think that was one of the things that I really wanted to really emphasize during this little talk that we have about how how it's all going down is that God doesn't say, here's a list of rules. Not yet. He does give us some of those later, and we're going to talk about those. But his covenant with Noah wasn't based on Noah's performance. And there's a good message in that for us. God's promises to us in salvation and redemption are not predicated on us being perfect and us getting everything right. He's the one that's backing up those promises. And we talked about the strength of a promise is actually in the one who's making the promise. It's not dependent on us. And I just took a lot of peace and solace, even writing these things up and putting them out, that God's the one behind it and that he's the one doing it. We went into Psalm 89 and we saw this theme of worship and praising God even when things don't stop. You know, one of the things we noted in the devotions was that Noah, though he was found righteous, before God, and he found favor with God, he's still a broken, sinful man. That seed of sin is still here. And as we had, the giants were in the land at the time, the Nephilim and all of that before the flood, and it got wicked and it got violent. God wiped it out and had to stop that roll of wickedness. And he says, okay, Noah, here's your family. But he knows you're still broken. You still have these mandates. You still have to rely on God. But God knew that there was still going to be pain. There was still going to be suffering. The wages of sin are still death. And he kind of just promised Abraham, I'm going to be there. And, then we kind of rolled up into Romans where we saw that Paul tells us that the covenant, it's not built on performance, like we said, but in fact, it had to come about this way so that it could be built on grace. And it's that grace that is put over and against and in opposition to, or maybe that's not the right word, not opposition, but in contrast, that would be a better word, to what it looks like to earn it by achievement. I saw several of you online this week, making comments that, holding yourself to these high standards of achievement. I mean, you feel like you've got to be perfect and you're always screwing up. I feel that in my soul. It's something that I've always struggled with is being harder on myself than anybody else. And I just wanted to really focus this week and reminding us that he is extending his grace to us. And he's saying we're starting over. Someone posted, I believe it was Thursday night, online about remembering, and that today, that it was Thursday's reading that took them back to the time of their salvation when God wiped the slate clean and he started over. And that's the beauty of grace. He wipes us clean. Paul says in 2 Corinthians that we are a new creature. The old things are passed away and the new have come. And he gives us this opportunity. But the great thing that I found in the teachings this week was over in like Psalm 28, where God's the one that's the strength behind it. You know, we talked about how he's not giving us, 10 steps to be your best you, or if you'll just do these list of rules and these list of things, you'll be good and you'll find all of that. But we talked in there literally about our family and how, this idea of God being our strength and our solace and our peace, those aren't coffee cup things. Those aren't just phrases and platitudes. That it's literally the energy that we have to kind of move forward sometimes. It's not because we're awesome. People say stuff like that to us all the time, and they really just don't have any idea, honestly, how much we struggle with that in our flesh. Now, that's if we are allowed to get in our flesh. You got to beat that sucker back. And if we can stay with our eyes focused on Christ and realize, as we said in Psalm 28, that this isn't his strategy. He's not giving us just, here, if you'll do these things and work the plan just right, but he is literally the strength in our bones. He's the wind in our lungs. He is somebody that we can run to for strength. And that's important in this part of the narrative because God knows, Noah knew in his heart that there would be times where we're going to need to run back to God. And we find out in later chapters that we just have to keep doing that over and over and over again. And then we kind of wrapped up, with the worship and Jesus fulfilling all of the promises. We have these Old Testament covenants and things that point us into a certain space, but it all points toward Jesus. And that's the thing that we have to really understand and really get our minds around, is that all of this stuff, everything that's coming up in the flood and in the promise and the rainbow and everything, it's a window into what faith looks like and what grace looks like. And, we're supposed to make that shift. It's an intentional shift in our mind and in our thinking to relying on God for our strength versus relying on ourselves to get everything right. And, one of the things that I jotted down was, I wonder what it would look like, and drop me some stuff in the comments, and, in terms of how you think about this, but what would it look like if literally every Christian, if you and I, just lived as if God's promises were secure, like we're not on the run. He's not coming after us. And I know intellectually we all believe that, and we say it and we say it out loud, but then we turn around and behave like we don't. When things start getting rocky, we start turning to ourselves. We start turning to what can we do to fix this. And granted, there are times and there are things and responsibilities that we do have to step through and do, but I wonder what it would look like if we first leaned on him instead of, then leaning on ourselves. The other thing that I thought about that I kind of wanted to pitch out there to you was, we're all human, right? We're all just, I don't want to say stumbling around in the dark, because that's not true, because he's illuminated our hearts. But if you're like me, you find yourself in need of repenting a lot every day for something. And it's really easy to get caught into this trap of thinking that the Lord's done with us, thinking that he doesn't want anything to do with us. But in reality, what we're supposed to be doing is relying on him in grace and through his strength, and relying in that covenant that he made with Noah. He's going to make them with Abraham. He's going to make them with David. And he's making them with us when he brings in the new covenant. And we have to really kind of step back and realize that this language of covenant, it's more than just a promise. It's a promise that he makes to us. And that tells us right there, the promise is going to come through. So we have to really live like that's true. And part of that's because our achievement our ability to do the right things is just a fragile, fragile system. I've never met anybody who felt like their good works and their way of keeping God's law and they're doing everything right, if they really felt like that was the way to keep their salvation, that they weren't living in fear all the time. I can't imagine walking through life thinking that it's all up to me. And one of the things this week, the Noahic covenant tells us is that God's the one that's securing it. That's the word I was looking for, securing this covenant. And in that provides us great, great strength. And we got to shift our perspective towards walking through religion and achievement and performance and living a life of grace and rescue and strength. And it really does impact how everything comes out in your life. A random Thursday, like I like to say, it impacts how you make little decisions, big decisions, how you walk before the Lord, all of these things. We just got to remember, we can't do it. This was a good, exciting week for me. I love the story of Noah and the flood. I know we kind of characterize it as a children's story, but it's really not a children's story. It is the story of faith and how we kind of got started. And it's our another do-over. In this series, I've been, what's the word I'm looking for? Impressed, maybe, or just reminded of how many times God gives us this do-over. And there's stories where there's an individual or a nation or a family gets a do-over, but he's just talking about the whole entire human race gets a mulligan, gets a do-over. And it's just a good reminder to us that we're never too far gone. And as the old preacher said, he said, God is always just one step away. We just have to turn and take it. And I like that. I like thinking about the fact that in the middle of our darkest days, when we're in the flood, the storm is raging, it will end. It may end with us in glory, but he's not distracted. He's not absent. He's still caring for us. He's still covenanting. Is that the right word? He's still making covenant. How about that? He's still making covenant with us. And so I just want to drop on here today. It's going to be a short one again, so we can get all the boys back into either into the studio or online and let them talk some more. But I hope you're enjoying the devotional series. Drop some comments when you read them online. Drop some comments, share them. Some of you are sharing them. I thank you for that. Help us build some community and help us to kind of get this thing out. The last thing I want to ask you or tell you before we leave is it's the month of March. This is March Madness Bible giveaway time. Every year, maybe for the last 8 years or so, maybe 7. Everything that the ministry gets in by way of donation, above and beyond the normal things, goes directly into a Bible giveaway. I mean, we've given away upwards around 10 or 1,000 to 1,500 Bibles in different years to certain ministries. Sometimes this year we've got about 3 or 4 different ministries that we're wanting to help supply. We've already shipped out almost 300 Bibles ahead of March Madness just to try to get it. We had some needs. So we got started. We went in the hole a little bit, but we try to raise, between $1,500, maybe $2,000 every year. So if you would like to be a part of that, you can go on the app and donate there, and you just select the area of greatest need, and then on the back end, we take everything that comes in March and we send it over into the Bible giveaway bucket. But do that for us, or pray through that. Don't do it if the Lord's not leading you to, or you can go on the website at thecruciblesfire.org/donate. We've just started our foundations class last week at Cross Brand Cowboy Church. If you're a part of that, don't forget to do your homework, and I'll see you on Sunday. But hopefully next week when we get to do the podcast, Bruce and Tim, or one of the two, will be able to be back with us, and y'all can stop listening to me just ramble in front of the camera. I appreciate you joining us this week for week 10. Now, week 11 is an interesting part of the story. The next 2 weeks you're going to really enjoy, I think. We get to start talking about the Tower of Babel and the scattering of the nations and what part that plays in God's redemptive plan. So it's an interesting part of the story that I really enjoy, and I think that it gives us a lot of promise from the Lord. Love you guys. Talk to you later. Thanks for joining us on the podcast today. See you next time.